Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Banquet Hall podcast. Video listeners, if y'all can't tell by the background and as well as the person on the screen, we're talking BinaBears today. New listeners to the Banquet Hall, first, welcome. The Banquet Hall is a podcast where we tell the stories of tomorrow today. You can follow the podcast on social media at Banquet Hall Pod. You can check out all the different interviews that we had, all the different episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can also go to the currently under construction but active website, new website, thefourthkyler.com, to learn more about the Banquet Hall, learn more about our guests. But really excited for the conversation that we have going with us today. Sabrina, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm doing swell.
Swell. I don't know if anyone's told me they've been doing swell in a while. Like, we need to bring swell back.
It's a good word. It's like, honestly, I don't know where the S comes from. Is it like super well? Like swell?
I was gonna say, is it like so well, super well?
Oh,
like
so well, super swell.
I don't know. We have to look up the origins of swell. Like that's our homework, I guess.
Yes.
But I feel like swell is just such a fun thing to say. Like, it's like, yeah, I'm doing swell. It's like a level above well.
Yeah, I feel like
sometimes I feel like when people say well, I think that they're lying.
No, yeah. It's like, yeah, I'm doing well. It's like an overwhelmingness all put into the word well. Because sometimes people don't know how to describe how they're doing. So they're just like, no, well, or I'm doing. When I say I'm doing, that's how you know, like, damn, she going through it.
Yeah, I'm doing is like, yeah, like there's not a word in the English dictionary that really describes all the shambles that I'm in. So like, I'm doing whatever doing is. I'm just doing.
Yes.
Man. But today we're doing swell. Happy to have you on the podcast. This is a long time coming. You were probably one of the first people I thought of wanting to have on the podcast when the idea started, which actually started, we're recording this on October 29th. The idea for the Banquet Hall started October 28, 2022. We just celebrated our first birthday. By the time folks listen to this, I believe this will be the anniversary episode of the Banquet Hall, actually. So shout out to anniversary episode.
Gosh, I feel honored. Happy birthday, Banquet Hall podcast.
Yes, what a fitting anniversary pod. Really excited for y'all to learn more about BinaBears, have the product placement of 2 BinaBears, as well as a Bina pillow, exclusive Bina pillow in the back. And so, yeah, I'm just really excited to get to it. So why don't we go ahead and get started with the question that I love starting the podcast with. Sabrina, where are you from and how did that shape who you have become and who you are becoming?
Ooh, I love it when you ask people this question. Because everyone's saying LA, I'm about to say
there's a little San Diego representation on the pod, but it is heavily LA, unintentionally, but it is a little heavy LA.
I do love LA though, because that's where my dad grew up, so I have my roots over there. But San Diego, yes, that is my home. But for a long time, since last year, and it's funny because when I listened to Andre's podcast, he said the same exact thing, and I'm just like, I love Andre. But it's really, home is wherever I am. Like, I make home wherever I go. And I discovered that when I went to the Philippines for the first time when I was an undergrad, and then when I was in the Peace Corps and traveled all over Europe. And I just felt like wherever I go, and I'm able to attract like certain people and communities in my life, and just I'm able to experience life in a way it's honestly a blessing. Like I truly am very thankful for God that he's allowed me to have such experiences. So home is definitely wherever I am. I'm home. So yeah.
Literally and figuratively, you are home. Since my podcast has been so heavily Los Angeles, let's get into San Diego lore a little bit. What's something that you wish more people knew about San Diego, or more people respected about San Diego, I guess? Like, because I just think every time people talk about like San Diego, because there's so many people not from this city, people always got something to say about San Diego. People complain about the food, the people, especially like Black San Diego pages. You can't go 2 posts without somebody being like, man, why San Diego ain't got this? Why San Diego ain't got that? So what do you wish people knew more about San Diego?
I feel like it's very family oriented. I think out of all the cities I've been to, like San Diego is, I think, one of the best places to raise a family. From just like the activities, the entertainment, um, like the weather, the food, and you could even just be in the comfort of your own home and just like be outside having a picnic in your backyard and or having a barbecue. It's like that is like I always tell people like I want to leave the country, I want to move, but if I were to ever raise a family, I would I would come back to San Diego.
Hmm, I feel that for sure.
Yeah, so yeah, that's my answer. I feel it though, it'd be expensive up in here, and there's not a lot of Black people here. Trust me, I live in Lakeside, so it's me and my brother. We're the Black people here. I don't go outside that much. um and that's why, eventually, since I'm still young, I eventually want to move to LA. But that's in the future, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, family oriented San Diego.
Yeah, as soon as you said like it's a great place to raise a family, I was like, yeah, yeah, it is. And I was like, damn, but that would be one expensive place to raise a family. But like, I think my perfect place to raise a family is in the city of Los Angeles, which literally I saw a post on IG, I think yesterday, it's like the second most expensive place to live in the United States. And it's just like, shout out to Southern California, just taxing us out of all of it. um, yeah, but I definitely agree with the sentiments that you shared about San Diego because I think if you've ever, because I think a lot of people haven't really experienced like the life of someone who really lives and like has been raised in San Diego. Because if you've been to someone's house in San Diego and like been in their backyard, and like you said, just chilling in a backyard or just chilling on somebody's patio or something, it's like, dang, like this is kind of like a little vibe. We in San Diego, it's palm trees, the weather's nice, got some tacos. I do like the food thing. I would never probably commit to San Diego having great food, but it'll do. I just my biggest gripe about San Diego, I can never find a burger. Just if I want a good burger, I really got to search for it. Tacos I can get any time of day, but if I just want like a nice burger, it's a mission.
Yeah, that's very true. I agree.
So we talk about being in San Diego. You decided to stay in San Diego for college, which is where we first crossed paths at UC San Diego. Do you remember any part of like our first interactions or like when we first crossed paths?
I literally try to think about it. I'm like, yo, I don't know. And I feel like because you were Marshall and you lived
Mm-hmm.
on campus, right? Your first year.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if like there was a time where we like ate, because I remember there was a time where I had a meal with Chelsea and Cam Coop, but I don't know. I feel like you were there, but I just don't know. So it was probably like at the BRC or at a Black Student Union GBM. Um, but I can't pinpoint like, yes, that was the day I met Kyler.
I feel that this is definitely one of those friendships where it feels like we just kind of spontaneously combusted into being friends. Like I don't know when it specifically it happened either, but I think it had to have been some like combination of like a lot of shared spaces, whether it's Black Campus Ministries, Black Student Union, the BRC. I'm sure like it couldn't even been like a high school conference or I don't know if you were on that trip to the Black College Expo. We was Black on a predominantly white campus. It wasn't that hard to cross paths.
Yeah, gosh, UCSD.
Good old UC San Diego. But what made you want to choose to go to UCSD?
I didn't. It was my last option. I, gosh, I'll never forget when I was, getting acceptance letters and stuff. I really wanted to go to UCLA, got put on the wait list. I was just like, for why? Um, and then I applied to SDSU, UCSD, and Point Loma Nazarene. Got
Mm.
accepted to SDSU, but was not going to go there. Um, got accepted to Point Loma Nazarene. I was like, ooh, okay, sure, sure. Looked at that tuition price. I was just like,
Yeah, PLNU is taxing.
yes. So I was just like, okay, UCSD it is, yay. um, and it was the best decision looking back, especially because not a lot of people know, but that was my mom's alma mater, so she graduated
Mm.
there with a psychology degree. Um, but man, that was a tough ride. I was looking at transferring to SDSU my first year. So yes, UCSD, if you hear this, you were not my first choice, but I thank you for the degree you've given me and the debt. I appreciate it.
Such an honest answer. I remember like early on in the podcast, my dad was saying like, yeah, like I feel like every guest you have from UCSD said that it wasn't their first choice or they like fell into UCSD. And it's just so consistent because everybody's like, yeah, I wasn't really trying to go to UCSD or yeah, I didn't know about UCSD, but here we are. But I actually didn't know that about your mom either. So that's cool that you are the child of a Triton as well. Also happy that you did end up at UCSD, all things considered. Like it was all meant to be at the end of the day. I can't imagine if you would have went to like Point Loma or something. Like, what would that version of Sabrina be like?
I probably would have dropped out sooner. I don't even know if there's a Black community in Point Loma, honestly.
I've been to Point Loma's BSU meetings a couple of times because Kalia went to Point Loma, and
Oh,
so like
yes.
I was like really close with a lot of the Point Loma people, and it's let's just say the Black community at Point Loma is very small. It's different than UCSD, but I did very much appreciate the camaraderie with a lot of their BSU people. But yeah, that community is a lot different, a lot smaller. Um, so yeah, happy you went to UCSD. Very happy we crossed paths. What did you study at UCSD?
Um, so I was jumping through a bunch of hoops. I got my degree in public health, um, but I entered in as a neuroscience physiology major because I thought I was gonna be a doctor. So I took like the bio classes, the chem classes, the chem lab class. Um, and then like in the middle of it, I was like, okay, this is not working. So I switched to public health and it was still like kind of a new major. Um, but I still like had the tug, like, oh, you should be a doctor. So I was looking at different things. I was just like, oh, maybe I could be a DO, a doctor in osteopathic medicine, or I could be a physician's assistant. But I still needed to take like the heavy science courses. So I tried to take organic chemistry. Um, and then I think at the end of my second year, I was just like, you know what? Just get the degree. Get the degree. We'll figure it out later. You need to leave this school. um, so yeah, I got my degree in public health. I thoroughly enjoyed the classes. I think I learned a lot about the health system in America and in the world in general, and how much I did not like it. I don't like the system that was set up for Black people in particular, um, and for other people of color. And yeah, I think after I graduated, I was like, you know what, we need to reconvene. We don't know if we want to get our masters in public health. Because yeah, I found myself like butting heads with just a lot of things. But I enjoyed what I learned, and yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously UCSD is a lot more than just what you learn in the classroom, but I know a lot of students, a lot of people that we went to school with, that major choice or those classes, it definitely was a journey. Like people come in as a human bio or engineering major, leave as another major. But I think that it's so powerful for us to be able to share those parts of our stories. I know there's some like UCSD students, current UCSD students who listen to this podcast. And whenever I talk a little bit about UCSD, I like when my guests share that honest like overview of what that was like, because I think a number of things that you mentioned are shared amongst a lot of people we went to school with, whether it was looking up how to transfer from UCSD our first quarter or first year, not knowing what we want to major or not being satisfied in what we want to major in, switching majors, and like you said, just trying to get the degree. Because even with something like cognitive science, like I had no idea what that was ahead of time at UCSD. Ended up just randomly choosing it after a class that I took. Like it was less random than that, but more or less it equated to being like randomly choosing it. Really liked the classes, but towards the end of it, I was like, yeah, I don't know if this is the right choice or not, but like here we are. But let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff outside of the classroom. We mentioned like a little bit of things that you were involved with, like BSU, like Black Campus Ministries. What would you say about like your overall UCSD experience and what you're taking with you from your time at UCSD and the people that you cross paths with?
Ooh, I that community at UCSD, the Black community, like really, like looking back and just sitting with the memories of, being in leadership in BSU, Black Campus Ministries. I really like got to know who I was and like who I wanted to become. And I got to like practice it in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think, being under leadership when Jazzy was chair of BSU was the most like life-changing thing ever. She was also my ATC in Summer Bridge. I love that woman so much. But she like exposed, she, what did she do? She gave an example of like true leadership of an organization. Not only to like her board, but the general body and to like the other leaders on campus. She led by example. Um, and yeah, I learned so much from her. And then from Anna from BCM,
Mm-hmm.
um, understanding like my own spirituality, my relationship with God when I was struggling with that, especially all the stuff that was going on while we were at UCSD in
Mm-hmm.
United States with the Black Lives Matter, and the continuous, shootings that were going on. And it was a lot. It was a lot to be a student at UCSD during that time and to just be amongst people that were just trying to get through their classes while also like feeling a tug like, oh my gosh, like we need to be fighting for something bigger. Like forget what we're learning in freaking, I don't know what class is this writing course that I'm writing about trees. Like I just what? Like that's like, yes, we need to like do what we got to do, but also we need to like look at the bigger picture and come together as a
Mm-hmm.
community, and educate ourselves like what is going on. um and yeah, so I took a lot from being in those communities, and I grew a lot in my leadership, um and understanding like what I truly enjoy doing. um yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that BCM, Black Campus Ministries, I think that was definitely a very needed space at that time in our lives at UCSD too. And I remember like when I first had like started going to BCM, I think it was like a position in my life where I was like just not necessarily fully lost, but like a lot at UCSD was just so unfamiliar. But when I heard that there was like a Bible study, I'm like, okay, even if I wasn't like frequently going to Bible study growing up, this is something familiar to me. And then like I went to like some of the university meetings, then I found out about Black Campus Ministries and got involved with that group. And I definitely agree that Anna is such a powerful leader and powerful person in that space. Also, BCM and InterVarsity came through with the iconic Black Lives Matter shirts that I feel like everybody at UCSD was wanting. Like, I remember when those came out on the blog, we was like, oh, like where y'all get them from? Because I feel like that was back when people wasn't really rocking a lot of Black Lives Matter gear. But I will always be thankful for that space being able to become more than just a Bible study, but really a place for like Black identifying folks to have ministry, but also like talk about like how we're doing with all that's going on in the world, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Black campus ministries. You mentioned a little bit as you were talking about like your introduction and home for you, and you talked about like going to the Philippines. Where are some other places that you've traveled and like got to experience, whether in college or post college, before we get to your experience in Europe with the Peace Corps?
Yeah. So when did I go to the Philippines? That was like my first international trip, entering into my third year in college. Um, in college, throughout that time, it was like a big time for me to really understand like my roots. So I was involved in, BSU. I was involved in the Filipino organization, KP, Kaibigang Filipino. And I wasn't able to get into Mecha, but that was just my choosing and just my capacity. But I tried to go to each of those three because I identify with being Black, Mexican, Filipino. Um, and yeah, because growing up, I didn't, there was no like cultural connection. Like I didn't grow up having, traditions coming from each culture. So that was like my time to really, really understand me, my roots, um, and like where like my ancestors are from. And being multi-ethnic, it's a very I mean, we're all multi-ethnic, but I think it comes with challenges, and sometimes I'll say I statements. I feel like I have to like pick and choose like what identity I am. Like, oh, like because the world sees me as a Black woman, I'm just a Black woman.
Mm.
Um, or and sometimes I felt like because I don't have like I can't speak fluent Spanish, I can't speak Tagalog. Um, I sometimes I don't feel like that connection sometimes. And it's hard because then you have like this identity crisis, like, okay, well,
Mm.
who the freak am I? So also like my purpose of being involved in all those communities was to really get to know me and learn from other people and like the cultures I identify with, and like listening to their stories of their home. And I learned so much. So Andrea, she was in dang, what do they call them? She was in like our group in Summer Bridge. What is it called?
You're sweet.
Thank you. Sweet. She was in my suite at Summer Bridge. So we became really good friends throughout college. And we were just sitting in one of like the computer rooms that was near Library Walk.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just talking about the Philippines. And I told her, I was just like, let's go. She was like, you would come? And I'm like, yes, let's go. I want to go. So we ended up planning, buying our tickets. And I went with her sister, her mom, back to where she grew up in the Philippines. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that was like the catalyst of like a lot of things. My love of just leaving this country. um, and just really understanding life outside of like this San Diego bubble. So yeah, that was the traveling in college. After college, yes, went to Moldova, went to Cyprus, Spain, Italy, Bologna, Italy, yeah. And of course, my favorite, got to go there twice, Paris, France. Went
Knew
there
that was
twice.
coming.
Yes. And I went to the Philippines again. And yeah, I planning to go to many more places, but more with intentionality rather than just for play. Yeah, but that's like in the future. So
Yeah, I love how you shared a lot about your multi-ethnic identities, because I know that when I was still like young at UCSD and like just really trying to understand more about the diaspora of Blackness, I remember thinking like, why are there like so many Black people going to KP, like BSU's over here? But like learning more about like why people are involved, I'm like, oh yeah, like there's like such a diaspora of Blackness. We've had a couple of the Black folks that have been a part of KP on the podcast, have Cameron, have you, trying to get your homie Crystal to get on the podcast. So Crystal, when you listen to this, bring your ass on the podcast. But I think those community spaces are just so important. The leaders that we encounter, the people that we encounter, that you never know if you're just like having a conversation with someone real sweet, end up in the Philippines, being a part of like the Black Student Union, having these life-changing experiences with such great leadership. Like definitely want to bury the lead a little bit, but definitely want to affirm what you said about Jazzy, and folks who haven't listened to Jazzy's episode on the podcast, definitely give that a listen, because I feel like when I look back at my time at UCSD and I think of predominantly thinking of like the Black women leaders that were in my life and I was surrounded by, you have your Stacy's, your Portia's, Jazzy, Fanon, Brelan, Alexis, like all these different Black women who really exemplified like what true leadership is. And when we were on board for BSU, like I think that was the moment when I understood what it meant. Like you would go through a brick wall for somebody, because Jazzy had us like ready. Like we was all like in sync. Like we was like, nah, like if we saving the Black students, we saving the Black students. Let's get this done. And I really appreciate that time of life, because like you said, it was a very transformative experience. And I definitely learned a lot about myself as a leader through like being involved with some of those community spaces like BSU, going to different GDMs of like KP or Metro, or going to ASA Celebration Africa event. Like I feel like that's why I appreciate having this kind of UCSD corner on the podcast, because I want the students, the current students at UCSD listening to this, to know that like your college experience can be so much more than just going to class and just getting out. Like get involved in something, be a part of something, join a board, check something out that you don't know about. Because man, when I look back at those 4 years at UCSD, we maximized it.
We like we created bonds that will literally last a lifetime. And even if like we don't talk on the day-to-day now, like whenever we meet like in person, it's just like, hey, how's it going? I miss you, I love you. Because we just all collectively like created something for each other on that campus, to help us like move through. We were each other's retention. Yeah, it was truly, they call it trauma bonding, I don't know. But we were tight. We were all tight. I so blessed that we were able to create a group like that. I think it's dynamic, and yeah. And yes, to all of the Black woman leaders that you were mentioning, yes to all of them. They were phenomenal, and I look up to each and every one of them. Yeah. Well, when you look at UCSD in that light, it's just like, what a great time.
when you start thinking a little bit more, I think like especially like now, it's like like you start looking at like some of the like deep threads of it, and it's like ugh. But when you really look at some of those moments, there truly are some of the fondest memories that I have of life. And I think that when the phrase trauma bonding came out on the streets, I was like, oh, that's what that was. I was like, ooh, it's crazy what some additional vocab words do to you. It's like, oh, so we wasn't supposed to be like that deeply bonding over the most traumatic stuff we've experienced in our lives. Like I thought those nights was kind of cool. Good old UC San Diego. But we've alluded to it a little bit. After UCSD, you decided to go to a place that I had never heard of in my entire life. I remember when I first found out that you were leaving us behind in America for the Peace Corps, and you said where you were going, I immediately went to Google Maps. I was like, where is Sabrina? So why don't you talk to our listeners a little bit about the Peace Corps, why you were interested in doing it, what led you to pursue it, and then we'll kind of get into the details of what that experience was like.
Yes. Let's see. So as we were approaching like fourth year, I knew I didn't want to go to grad school. But with my degree, it was slim pickings with jobs. Because they all wanted you to have a master's in public health. So I was like trying to seek out like, okay, what the heck am I gonna do? um, and I actually, when I was taking this class, I think it was during the summertime, it was like an HIV and AIDS class. I wanna say it was a public health class, like it was in the public health sector, but I was learning some wild stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, this is difficult. um, but the professor actually brought folks to share their testimonies of folks that were living with HIV and AIDS, and she also brought in a return Peace Corps volunteer, and that was like the first time I really like listened to someone and their testimony of like what they were doing in the Peace Corps. And he was I think he volunteered. I don't know where I can't remember where he volunteered, but it was at a clinic dealing with like HIV patients and stuff. So then I got to like thinking and doing all the research and stuff. And then I don't know if Andre remembers this, but we actually had lunch together at Subway. He got his chicken noodle soup. And
What, a soda on the side or just a chicken noodle soup?
chicken noodle soup. Um, and yeah, we were eating lunch together. We were just talking about like what we're thinking about doing, like, approaching graduation. And then I was describing what I wanted to do, and he was just like, that kind of sounds like the Peace Corps. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna take that as confirmation. Like, okay, let me really, really get let me really like try to plan this out. I didn't tell my parents until I basically was in the midst of the application.
Mm.
Mom was not feeling it. Dad was just like, what? And he just lets me do, like, he knows, like, he's like, okay, she's doing something, who knows what. But yeah, it was really scary for my mom in particular, because she didn't know anything about the Peace Corps, or where I was gonna go. She was worried about me missing Ronnie's graduation, and like, what if somebody dies? What if all the what ifs? And I just couldn't hear it. I was like, this is already scary enough. I just need to do it at this point.
Right.
So I applied. I knew I wanted to have hands-on practice in like health, anything health related. So I applied to the health sector of Peace Corps. And I wanted to go to Ecuador. So you got to choose like where you wanted to go. It's like, oh, Ecuador, perfect. I can learn Spanish. I've always wanted to like, get better in my Spanish and stuff like that. So I applied in the application after I graduated, and I was also a caregiver at the time just to make some cash. My gosh. That caregiving that's a whole, I can write a book about caregiving. But yeah, so that's what I did after I graduated from UCSD, applied to the Peace Corps. And then I waited, and then I got accepted, and they said I was going to go to Moldova. I was like, where the what?
You're like, Mo, what?
Moldova. So then I looked up what that country was, and I told I told God, I was just like, you know what? If you wanted me here, you got me here. It doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter where I go. I know this is something that you want me to do, so I'm just gonna do it. Okay, you want me in Moldova? Cool. So I accepted it. And then I told everybody, so I'm gone for 2 years. I'm going to Moldova and I'm going to be teaching health education to students. So bye. And it was the best decision I have ever made in my entire life. Yeah. Yeah. I hope I answered your question. I
No,
think.
absolutely. I mean,
Oh,
yeah, it was like, what was like, how'd you end up at a Peace Corps essentially? And you talked about that was a beautiful story that introduces the why. Was what was the most, I would say, yeah, what was the most interesting part about being in Moldova? Like, what was something that was either shocking or something that was like very impactful for you outside of what was the impetus for BinaBears?
yeah. Um, Man, I just learned so much about their culture, um, and just about humans in general. Like I was put into a home that where they didn't speak a lick of English. They were, you know, they live differently than I do. We live different lives, and to communicate and try to really understand each other, it was like, I mean, I already had, some sense of like empathy and understanding. Like I'm pretty an easygoing person, but I really had to challenge myself and let go a lot of American like thinking that I didn't realize I had,
Mm.
like American culture. And I honestly, I tried to just assimilate to theirs. Um, because I was just like, first of all, get rid of your your elitism and entitlement.
Mm.
Because I feel like just living here, we all have that, no matter how good of a
Absolutely.
person you are. And I didn't realize that until I went to Moldova. And I really had to check myself a lot of times when I would like find myself frustrated when like things didn't go a certain way, or like they just did stuff like differently. Um, and there was like no right and wrong way to do anything. And that's how I wanted to um have my service. Like I wanted to be the volunteer that didn't put American ideas into their heads. I wanted them to see like their own culture, but also like use the resources that they already have. um and demystifying the myths surrounding health. So yeah, that was what I learned a lot about Moldova. And it's oh, they're just such a beautiful culture and so family oriented. And they take pride in their crops and their food. Um and yeah, they're just so I miss a lot of them. um but yeah, that is like the big takeaway from like Moldova. um yes. Peace Corps. The big takeaway was I won't ever do Peace Corps again, because I think the idea is there, but the execution um, could be a lot better. And I say that because it is an organization that's run by, Americans, and we tend to, go to these countries and like try to fix things and do things like our way, when it's like, no, you need to meet like the people where they're at and say, how can I serve you? Like, what do you need from us? um and that was like the big takeaway I got from like being within Peace Corps as an organization, like understanding that I am not here to teach them, like, I don't know, like a new way of like being. um yeah, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. And if I'm not mistaken, you were in Moldova when the pandemic started, right?
Yes, that, whew, my gosh, I just got stories on stories. Um, Yeah, so during 2020, I was planning on coming back that year in like June, July. But that's when the pandemic was like becoming at an all-time high.
Mm-hmm.
I think I started hearing about it, like my mom started talking about it in like February.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's so much going on. So much going on, from like Kobe passing away,
Mm-hmm.
my best friend telling me that she was diagnosed with cancer. And then I was actually in Cyprus at the time, um, when like it COVID was just like it was like a within a week span. I feel like it was just going everywhere, and I was starting to see stories of freaking Americans taking toilet paper from Costco and just doing all sorts of dumb shit. I'm just like, and I was so happy. I was just like, I am so glad I'm over here because y'all looking real stupid right now. Real stupid. Um, but when I came back to the city, Chisinau in Moldova, after coming from Cyprus, they were like, okay, you got to stay quarantined.
Mm.
And we were like, oh, okay. And they said, okay, you're not going to go to school this week. You're just going to stay quarantined, and then we'll take you back to your village in like a couple days. Um, so yeah, we were in the city for like I think 2 days, and then we all went back to our sites. Um, and then I went back to my site on Thursday, and then there was rumors that we were all going to go home, and I thought like Peace Corps folks were just joking around. Friday, can't remember this is all in March. Friday, they were like, all right, pack your bags. You're going to be leaving in 2 days. And I just, it was too much. It was absolutely too much, because in the Peace Corps, you're supposed to go through a close of service process where, you meet up with your cohort and Moldova professional staff, and they tell you like how to transition back in the States, because it's hard. It's hard, one,
Yeah.
to find a job. It's hard to acclimate back to, the life that, you used to live. There's just a lot of things that go into transitioning back to being in America. We didn't get any of that. They were like, pack your bags, pack 2 years worth of your stuff. We got to go. And then I was just like, oh my gosh. So I had to call my teacher partners. I had to call the principal at the school. I freaking went to my host mom. And I was crying. She's like, it's okay. This is all in Romanian.
Yeah.
She's like, this is okay. um, you got to be safe and healthy. And I'm just an emotional wreck packing my stuff within 2 days, and I was just crying for that whole week. And we didn't even leave that country until I think the following Thursday, because there was just a whole bunch of like, they were trying to communicate with the embassy. Some airports were shut down, and it felt like they were toying like with us, like they weren't doing anything to get us shipped back to the States. um and finally I was like, okay, I didn't really, take it all that well. It was a lot of wine drinking and just it was a time, because my mom was scared. We didn't know if I was coming back home. I didn't know if I was coming back home, or if I would have to stay there during the pandemic. But I finally got home, went to Iceland, and then went to DC, and then flew back to San Diego. And then I saw my dad, and I just started crying.
Aw.
It was so, it was a lot. And then when I got here, I had to quarantine
Yeah.
because we just didn't know. I freaking went to two different places in the world. Um, and we just didn't know what was going on. And I just had to sit with that. I'm like, okay, I'm no longer a Peace Corps volunteer. I have no job. I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. Um, cool. And we got pandemic stuff. So I was cool being isolated, because I was already isolated,
Yeah.
although, but it was just like figuring out like I now I have to reflect on my Peace Corps experience. I don't there's so much. Um
Oof.
and I don't think I did I did reflecting, but I needed to be busy. So I,
Yeah.
I worked and did a whole bunch of other stuff. But yeah.
Wow. Just wow. Like, there's been a few guests that had like some very unique 2020 experiences. Like I think Aaliyah was at semester at C when 2020 started, or when the pandemic started, and every time I'm just like, wow, like what a time we were in at that point in 2020, and obviously we're still in parts of those times, but just thinking through like what you said about like the toilet paper crisis and the isolating, people just having no idea what's going on, like, and I was just really like laughing at you talk about how stupid America was, because this is the period, because there's different phases of the pandemic. Like this part of the pandemic, this was when people was like, oh, like we should drink hand sanitizer, and like people was doing a lot.
So much. I'm just like, bro, what am I coming back to?
Man, man. But yeah, what a time. And I know you have plenty of Moldova experiences and stories that impacted you. Um, just wow. I'm just happy that everything worked out. You had a transformative experience and you were able to make like a lot of change there and impact a lot of people. So thank you for sharing parts of that experience with our listeners. But I want to go ahead and transition to kind of the main course of our conversation. We have it around your neck, I have it in the background. BinaBears. Let's start at the beginning. What was the reason why you chose to start BinaBears? What was the inspiration for it? What is your why? What's the BinaBears origin story?
Oh my. Um, the origin story, it could be looking back, it could be dated beginning in high school when my grandma passed away. And that was like the first time I watched her, go through the process of like dying, and taking her last breath. And that was wild. Like no one growing up, nobody talks about it in general. Nobody talks about like the physical like aspect of like a human being taking their last breath and like what happens to your eyes, the sunken ears, the skin, um, and just everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. And after that, during high school, I volunteered for hospice care. Um, and I was a volunteer, and I volunteered at hospice homes where folks would go and take their loved ones who are like near death. Um, and yeah, I would help families, sit with them and hear their stories about their loved ones. I would sit with the patients, whether they were alert or not, and just be for them and comfort them, because even if they're not alert, I know that it's a scary process for like the person that is dying to be going through that by themselves. So it's always nice to have like someone there with them, knowing that they'll be okay in their next transition. But yeah, through all of that, I learned how to make memory bears. And it's it's a big thing. Like I know not a lot of people know about memory bears, but a lot of folks, usually older folks, be sewing them. I'm usually the young one that's on the sewing machine, but they just take clothes that belong to their loved ones and create them into a everlasting keepsake. And I really found joy in creating those bears. It was my senior project for high school. And then after that, I, went to college. And then I want to say my senior year, I was gifted a sewing machine from my mom. Very emotional, because I knew that I didn't know it at the time that like, BinaBears, the business was gonna be a thing, but I knew in my spirit like this sewing machine like means so much. Because this is something that I can use to create things that bring people joy. So yeah, I had a lot of time to think, of course, being the Peace Corps. I dove into a lot of videos of like, yeah, just a lot of videos learning about different things to do and make impact in the world, and entrepreneurship came into my life. And I had to understand what that word even means, because nobody in my family was a business owner. Entrepreneurship wasn't talked about. It wasn't a topic of discussion. Um, but yeah, so that was already, it was already stewing in my mind. And then my mom was the one, she was just like, I got a message from God saying, being a bear, it's like you need to have like a business that where you create bears, and it's, I see it being called BinaBears. I was just like, okay, that's nice. I didn't, the first time she said, I was just like, oh, okay, because I was still in that mindset, like, I probably just need to get a job, like, you know. But she said, till this day, she was like, I don't know what, that's what God told me, so I just told you. And then when I came back after the pandemic, I was still trying to figure out, like, I don't know what to do. And then she said it again. She was like, why don't you just do BinaBears? Just try it out. I'm like, okay, here we go. Let's do it. So I ended up reading a book by Gary Vee called Crushing It. And he was just talk about entrepreneurship and social media, and how you can use these tools to maximize your business, and to really make impact in the world, and how you can use these tools in an effective way. And he was the first, I think, entrepreneur that I truly looked up to and learned a lot from. He popped up on my algorithm in Moldova, and it makes sense because he, grew up in the Soviet Union area. It's just like, wow, the connection. But yeah, so that is how BinaBears came to play. I told myself, you need to finish that book before you even start doing anything else. So I finished the book, created my own website, did a lot of just learning on my own, trying things out, and I launched it in November 19th, 2020. And yeah, it was an ode to all the people that have passed away in my life. And yeah, although it was a very healing process, as the years went on, I like dove into it very deeply, to the point where I wasn't even like thinking about all of my problems and all of my like healing that I needed to do. I kind of used that as like, oh, this is my healing. Like, this is, I'm helping others, so it's helping me. And no. Yes, it did that. Yes, it did help others, but I didn't prioritize myself first, and that's what led to my break. But yeah, that was like the holistic story of BinaBears, and kind of coming into the relaunch. And yeah.
And so you mentioned the break that you took. What you talked a little bit about, like, kind of that burnout and just like not really making space for yourself, that kind of led to the break. What do you feel were some of the important things that you learned about yourself during the break, or that were impactful for you during the break, or just meaningful in general? And I know that you have like a series of IG posts on the BinaBears page that talk a little bit about some of the things you learned from the break, but perhaps you could share a little like tidbits for our listeners.
Sure. Um, so yes, taking a break, and me taking a break usually is just like, all right, a week break, just not going to do anything cool. But this time I really was like, you need to be intentional with this break. You are not going to touch that sewing machine. You are not going to write down any business ideas. You're not like, you just need to really figure out like what is going on inside of you. So I ended up reading both of Michelle Obama's books, Becoming and The Light We Carry, because I feel like those books, one, I love that woman. Two, I feel like I was in a season of becoming, and I really needed to get clear on, okay, who is it that I want to become, and what is it going to take for me to get there? Like, what work do I need to do to get there? And so I did a lot of like very intentional, like intentional reflections, but also intentional like breaks where I just didn't do anything. I didn't think about anything. I was just being, and if I wanted to do something, I would do it, and I wouldn't feel guilty of not doing this other productive thing. Like, I was just focused on, going to work, eating, getting exercise, reading my books when I could, sleeping. Oh my gosh, sleep. Yes. We are not hyping up the 4 hours of sleep, the 3 hours. No, we need we need 8 hours, Sabrina. Because I would push myself during the business. I would push myself, and I would be working a full-time job. But before, I would like wake up like at 6 or 5 in the morning to do this BinaBear order. And I would get off of work, driving traffic all day, eat a little bit, and then go back to work on BinaBears. And then I also had this other part-time job. So I was doing too much. And I was giving a lot of myself to different entities. So yeah, that was a part of it. And another part of it was I needed more clarity on where I wanted the business to go. Because throughout that time, I was avoiding like my purpose when it came to BinaBears. And my purpose is to, speak about death in a way that is, transformative in how we experience life. Because death and life, it's one of the same. Death is a part of life. And it was really hard for me to really understand, like, that's what God was pushing me to do. Like, no, you need to speak about it more. You need to be okay with receiving these stories and okay with the emotion that you get when folks tell their story about their loved ones. You need to heal from your own, the people that, have passed away in your life, and the hurt and the pain that caused you. And it was tough to really sit with that, because I didn't realize, like, I was trying to avoid it. I was trying to, do happy bears, like, Mother's Day and graduation and all that stuff. And I was trying to avoid, like, really, like, advertising for bears for loved ones that have passed away, to celebrate loved ones that have passed away. So this break gave me clarity of, like, you need to be talking about this, because this is part of your story. It's been part of your story since you were younger, since you were a caregiver volunteering for hospice care, like, and that was hard. Like, I don't wake up every day and time to talk about death, everyone. Like,
Right.
I don't like enjoy it. It's not like, and I feel like a lot of times people get confused with, like, passion and purpose, because not all the time they're not going to be one and the same. Your purpose is going to lead you to a place that's very uncomfortable. Sometimes it could be embarrassing. And I feel like a lot of people sometimes don't understand the two. Because my passion is, creating, and just loving people. But my true purpose is to, be a light in places that seem a little dark and musty. And that's hard, because sometimes I don't want to talk about that stuff. And there are a lot of times where, after I would submit an order, I'd get phone calls from customers, or people would just be emotional around me. And although it's like, it's a beautiful experience, to have that all the time, it's like, I'm not just, creating these products like, all right, let's just hop onto Amazon, create these products. Cool. They buy them. It's like, it's a very emotionally taxing thing. And I needed to get stronger in that sense and really like understand, this is my purpose, and really sit with like the people that I love who are no longer here, and be like, okay, what, y'all are not here anymore, and what is that like teaching me? Um, but yeah, that was, in a sense, that was the 9 month break, and that was probably the longest break I've ever really taken for myself in terms of like work ethic stuff.
I know. I think that one, thank you for just sharing about just all the things that you were reflecting on during that break. I think that that's very impactful for folks to be able to hear because, like you said, sometimes we glorify oh, I only slept 2 hours because I was grinding, like get your bread up, get your LLC, all that. But we need to also give space to validate and affirm the need for us to rest and take care of ourselves, getting that 8 hours of sleep, stretching, getting exercise, getting some sunlight, drinking water, like one of the most important things I always remind people of if I have a friend that's like stressed out, first thing I say, oh, when's the last time you had some water? Because I think that those are some little things that when you take that first sip of water after haven't had a lot of water in a while, like you realize like, oh yeah, like my body needs this. And I think that as creatives, as creators, as artists, when we get to these places where we're really in our zone, sometimes we can like check out of that self-care aspect, but that self-care is so important because the business isn't going to last if you don't. Like that's just the reality of the situation.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and also, yeah, breaks help with your own sustainability. It's like that's nice that you're going real hard, but eventually you're gonna run out of gas. So how do we like make ourselves more sustainable? Not even just for the business, but like for you, for your loved ones, like you as a person, a human being, um, because you affect like all the people around you, even like the people you meet at a grocery store, like, and that's why like when I be driving to the car and people like be cussing me out or giving me the middle finger, not that I'm a bad driver, people are just a little upset. I just I really feel for them because it's just like, wow, like I hope you're doing okay. I really hope you're doing okay because it's not that serious. Especially if I'm already going 80 miles an hour on the freeway and you're just trying to go like an 85 or a 90. Like I hope you're doing okay, like for real. But um yeah, just like that energy, like we literally are all connected. It is absolutely wild how we just don't all see that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's what I'm you know, trying to live out, speak out, connection.
Hey, you're doing a great job about it, and I think that our listeners and the BinaBear supporters who are jumping into this episode for the first time, they're going to really appreciate just hearing about your story. And I think that all of that ties into your business model overall, because I think that, well, one, to kind of set up what I'm about to say, you had messaged me a few months back when you had made your commitment to being a guest on the podcast, and you mentioned that you wanted to talk about, I think it was an IG post you sent me, but it's talking about we have a culture terrified of death and fearing aging. And I think one of the things that I really appreciate about BinaBears and your brand is the storytelling aspect of it. Even when you're like really getting started, like your emphasis is really on sharing people's stories at your core. Like you're having people purchase bears and then you will share the bear that was completed, share the story behind it, share your interaction with that person, share why this bear is important to that person, why the process of it was important to you. And I think that's so beautiful to see because if you follow BinaBears on Instagram at bina.bear_, which we'll get into a little later, but you're seeing so many different stories of humans. Like it's humanity at its core. And whether it's friends that I have that have gotten BinaBears, like I know Melanie purchased several bears from you, like just being able to see people have their story represented in a way that's very important. And like I sincerely read those captions when you post it, because it's like, what is this person's story? What is the meaning behind this bear? Because yes, they're quote unquote just bears, but there's so much meaning behind the clothes that we wear. There's so much meaning behind the clothes that our loved ones wear. And so I just think it's really beautiful that you're able to create these memory bears for people. Yeah, I don't even think there's a question there, but just affirming that brand and the storytelling, because it's really intentional. And I think your intentionality really shows.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Kylie.
Of course. Where do I want to go next with BinaBears? Let's transition to talk a little bit about these guys behind me, the BinaBears, the Bina pillow that I have. So I think this might have been like probably within the first few months when you launched BinaBears. I think I got these back in 2020. Do you remember creating these back? I know you remember, but what do you remember about creating these in the back?
Yes, honestly, shout out to you for honestly being one of the many like A1 like BinaBear buds. That's what I like to call y'all.
The Bina
I
buds.
yeah, it's like you and Paolo and Crystal for sure. And you know, everyone else
Yeah.
sports, but I feel like the three of you truly it's yeah, just thank you to everything that you have done. So the Bears were definitely part of the beginnings of when I launched BinaBears, and I feel like I don't know if your bears were the first where I had like t-shirts of like a whole picture.
Mhm.
I think so. I think yours was the first. And then I was like, ah shit. Because the bear pattern um that I have, the belly is like the seam. So it
Mhm.
would have like cut off like those images. And I was just like, I'm not about to do that to Kyler. Where these are some iconic shirts that I feel like have so much of his story like embedded in them.
Mhm.
So I was like trying to figure out, okay, like I know this Kyler's shirts are not going to be the only shirts that I'm going to get with like these huge logos on them. So let me try to figure out like how to make a belly out of them. So I had to like draw like the outline of like the two belly pieces.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I was just like, okay, they're working. Um, and then I was like, you know what? I feel like the Black Lives Matter one needs like a cape because
Mhm.
one Kyler, yeah, I just yes. Um, because I feel like to you, well, one, you and your superheroes, I feel like you're a big nerd in that sense.
Yeah.
But I feel like you are like the hero in your own story too. So I wanted to, you know, capture that in the bear. Um, and it was really fun to make. I was really creative and just like playing around, like, ooh, like what different things can we do? And you gave me some really tough clothes to work with. I'm just like, all right.
Unintentionally, I wasn't trying to challenge you. I just was like,
I
hey, these are the
know.
clothes I got.
Yes. So the same with the Lakers, like you gave me a jacket. I'm just like, I don't know. Like, and that was the first time like I tried to like hand do like a huge jacket because I wanted to keep all of like the logos and
Mhm.
the
I
all of
love the
the
foot.
oh, thank you. Yeah, because you know, some memory bears they like chop it all up and make it into some, but a big part of like the bears that I create, I want to still capture like the essence of the clothing that you're giving to me. So if you're gonna give me a dress, I'm gonna try to like make a mini dress out of it. If you're gonna give me a jacket, I'm gonna try to make a jacket out of it. Um, because we forget, like if I just freaking cut up all the clothes, it's like, oh, this is nice. I can't remember if it was a shirt, pants, a jacket. But yeah, and I think it's unique to just what we wear as humans. Like, yeah. And then the pillow, of course, I was like, all right, it's Kyler's birthday. Let's bring him a pillow. I've only ever like made a couple pillows for people. Um, but I feel like jerseys are hard to make bears out of. So I was like, let me make a pillow for him. And that one was definitely fun. I enjoyed mixing the jersey with the purple um,
So the
purple
purple,
velvet.
yeah, the
Yeah.
purple. When I saw it, I was like, oh, this is fire.
Yes, I love a good texture in fabric. So yeah, they were very fun to make. I think I had a lot of fun, and just knowing you as like a friend, I was like, oh, I'm making something for my friend and I'm taking so much time. I think that's like one of the many things I enjoy um about creating these. Like sometimes I'm not able to, go out and hang out with a bunch of folks, but I will like try to take time to create something for you. And that's like how I share my love and like the capacity sometimes at the time and I have to show you that I love you. It's like I'll spend 6 to 10 hours creating something for you because you mean a lot to me, and I see you in your story, and yeah, so
Well, I love all three of them. I remember you gave me the pillow after a long day of birthday festivities. And so I was like, oh, like I'm all emotional and whatnot, receiving the pillow. And what I love about the pillow is the jersey, that the D'Angelo Russell jersey I gave you. That's one of the Lakers Christmas jerseys, and probably one of my favorite jersey designs ever. But if I'm not mistaken, I think that either I think I think somebody put it in the dryer when I usually hang dry my jerseys. And then like the lettering started coming off. So I was like, oh, the jersey's ruined. I can never wear this jersey again. So I just didn't know what to do with it because like the letters was falling off and I didn't feel confident in my ability to fix it. And so I was like, yeah, like let's see what BinaBears can do with a jersey. And you impressed me. So love the pillow. Love the bears. And I highly encourage our listeners, if you want a memory bear or any other BinaBear products, highly encourage y'all to check that out. We'll get into where they can find and how they can order in a bit. But I wanted to ask one more specific BinaBears question first before we get into that. And that is, amongst all the things that you learned during your break, amongst all the different things that go into BinaBears, what has BinaBears taught you about yourself?
ooh. Mm, um, I think BinaBears has taught me that how much of like a powerful creator I am of like my own life. Yeah. It like this business has empowered me to really see how I can create, how creative I can get with like building my own life. Um, yeah, and that I feel like is like the greatest gift I
Absolutely.
I could ever receive, to be able to visually see like something that doesn't exist um in this world and just creating it, whether that be a bear or just like where I want to go in life. And it's empowered me to do so. And yeah, I'm not stopping until, I get there. So woo.
I love that. And if I'm someone who's listening to this episode, I'm convinced I need a BinaBear. How and where do I get me a BinaBear?
Okay, well, the official relaunch of the BinaBear website is November 19th. So mark your calendar. Um, there's going to be a little holiday gift, if you will, when you order in the month of November. Um, if you order in the month of November, you'll receive a little holiday gift from me to you. And you can order a bear on my website, www.binabears.com. Me and a student friend of mine, we are creating a website that is still intimate, but also streamlined. So it's going to be easy to, a questionnaire is going to pop up. You'll be able to input like what you're looking for. Also, you'll still have the opportunity to share your story and get a gifted discount. So kind of streamlining it all on the website. You can message me on Instagram, but on the website is where you order.
Absolutely. BinaBears.com. Go ahead and head over. And holiday season is right around the corner. Like, I think BinaBears, and this isn't even like paid advertising, like Sabrina didn't tell me to say this, but I think BinaBears is a great Christmas gift. Like, if you unwrap a BinaBear or get one for yourself, people can give Christmas or holiday gifts for themselves if you don't celebrate Christmas. But check out the website, check out all that BinaBears has to offer. Follow on IG, which is at bina.bear_, and just learn more about the story, learn more about the stories of the many people who have purchased BinaBears. Because like I said, I said this pre-recording, but one of the things that really got me into wanting to create the Banquet Hall was this idea of sharing stories and just connecting us as humanity. And I definitely think that the stories that you share is all a part of that. Like, there's a lot going on in our world all the time, and especially right now. And I think that if you can put some humanity into your life in whatever way possible, it just makes things so much better.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't have said it any better, Kylie.
So let's transition a little bit out of BinaBears Corner and talk a little bit about you as a blossoming entrepreneur, as a growing professional. You've had an opportunity since starting BinaBears to really further your professional development by attending conferences and different seminars and workshops to really improve just overall as a business person. Are there any particular conferences or experiences that were overly meaningful for your professional development, or things that you've taken away from some of these professional development opportunities?
Yeah, I feel like the three that I've been to, they're all named different things, but kind of run by the same people. But I think the most meaningful one was probably the Fit in Faith conference. And it was, the Grow Your Business for God's Sake conference. And the business world is like another beast. There's a lot of different things that I don't necessarily agree with in how things are run as a business. And to really put God at the center of my business is something that I strive to do, not necessarily like to tell people about God and kind of do this weird missionary stuff, but to really like center myself so that whatever I put out there, it's nothing but like good things that bring, joy and healing to people. And yeah, I feel like that conference was really, really impactful, because I know as I continue to pursue entrepreneurship and being in these business circles, I need to stay true to my center and my core. And I don't want to like be swayed by money and stuff like that. I want money. Don't get me wrong. Money is what I want. But I think, because I think money is a very powerful tool that is in the hands of many that don't use it for good. And I think money is exposure too. It exposes people for who they truly are. So if I could build a business and build businesses that exposes like God's light and love, shoot, all right, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's expose. Let the money expose.
Yes, absolutely. Professional development is an ongoing thing. And I think that the more that we're able to put ourselves in these spaces where we're learning more about business principles, but also more about who we want to be as business people, as entrepreneurs, as creatives, I think it's so important. And Jada and I, on the episode of Free Game Fridays, we were talking a little bit about the importance of conferences and like how you can get some of those professional development opportunities. So I highly encourage our listeners to do similar things, follow similar pathways, engage with your craft outside of what you're currently doing, just seeing how going to something, whether it's a 1 hour Zoom meeting or a week-long conference, can really enhance what you're putting out there. And so just to kind of take us towards the tail end of the podcast, I mentioned before we started recording that I wanted to experiment with a new segment of the Banquet Hall. So putting you on the spot for the 1 year anniversary episode, don't be afraid. It's just, what I'm calling it is the fourth place. And so for some background context of why I got to the fourth place, one, obviously I'm the fourth Kyler Nathan the fourth. So I wanted to have something to do with the four in here. But during my MBA program, we talked about the concept of the third place. This is something I believe Jade and I even talked about on a podcast, or one of these podcasts, we talked about it. But it's this idea that there has to be this, humans have a need for this third place, somewhere between home and then work and school, or whatever your like professional or education opportunity is. You need a third place to also be able to convene and find community. Starbucks has this as like part of their business model, to where they're giving people a place to go between home and work, or home and school, to do business, to find community. Coffee shops are a great third place. Open mics is a physical third place for me. And I also see the Banquet Hall podcast as kind of like a virtual third place, where people can come here for community while they're at home or while they're at school, but just some type of third place. So this segment, the fourth place, I'm going to start asking, potentially if it works, I'm going to start asking listeners to think of what is a fourth place in your life where you find peace and serenity. So if home is where you're resting, work or school is where you're getting your professionalism done, you have your third social place that you're going to, but what is that fourth place? If you could give us an idea of where Sabrina is most at peace, most at tranquility, somewhere where you find yourself just, feeling like the most peaceful version of yourself, whether that's out somewhere, in somewhere. But what do you think of when you think of like a fourth place for you, if that makes sense?
It used to be me in nature by myself, but now as like I continue to get older, it's me with one other person that I love, and just being present with them in conversation, in the location, with no phones. I think like those moments, like whether it be like in my home, on a walk, eating in a car, those moments give me peace. And like, wow, I'm like with this other human being, we're here together, and I love them so much. And yeah, I still have peace, when I'm with myself in nature, but I think that's like the peace, another peace.
No, I think that's a perfect answer. I was going to guess that was your answer too. But
Really? Wow.
yeah, just because thinking through like who you are as a person, your love for nature, your love for adventure too. Like, listeners might not know, but it don't take much to get Sabrina on a hike to wherever. It could be any type of unstable rocks or restricted access. Sabrina gonna go on a hike for sure. But when I was coming up with this question to ask, I was thinking through like what we do as kind of our hangouts. And over the last few years, we've always prioritized linking up to catch up, chat associated with some type of nature, some type of physical activity. So we've gone around walks around Lake Murray. More recently, we were just sitting at like La Jolla Cove, literally by the ocean, just talking about life. And those are the moments that I look back very fondly and will always remember, because it's like, we don't really have that much of an agenda. We're going to meet at La Jolla Cove, walk. We might end up at the base of a cliff looking at crabs and looking at people in the water. Like, who knows? But we have such great conversations, great catch-ups, and literally just talking about whatever's on our mind. Sometimes it's business related, sometimes it's dating, sometimes it's personal life. But that's definitely one of my fourth places too, where it's like, yeah, just being in nature or just being unplugged with someone else to where it's like just
Yeah.
us, like tapping in with each other, getting to see how we're really doing, having space to do and talk about whatever and just really exist and
Mhm.
give each other like undivided full attention. So yeah, definitely love a good nature walk.
Yes.
And then one more thing that I wanted to touch on before we get to the kind of the quick hitter questions at the end of the podcast, or I guess this is technically one of the quick hitter questions. I'm going to say a word and I want to get your reaction, your feedback, your experiences with the next word I'm going to say. And that word is Beyonce.
Woo! That woman, listen. I am real good with budgeting, investing. People know me and my money about my money. But when it comes to Beyonce, all budgeting things lost, gone, out. All the tactics that, yeah, she is, she's Beyonce.
Full stop. Period. How many times did you see Renaissance?
Three.
And
And
you
they were
saw it
all,
in Houston. You saw it in Toronto, right? And
and
where else?
LA on her birthday.
Just the time of your life, huh?
My gosh, I was just like, we're gonna take this BinaBear break all the way. We're gonna go all the way.
Hey, but life is about these moments. So I'm happy that you are able to invest in that side of you. Like, I mean, your Beyonce is my Lakers. Like, I'm gonna go to a Laker game. I'm gonna have me the time of my life and just have those experiences. Like, yes, it costs X hundred amount of dollars to go, but when you're there, when you're with people you care about, like you're like, oh, I would have spent 30 times as much if I had it to be here and have these moments. Like I
Yeah,
just got back from Denver watching opening night with the Lakers. They lost and I still had the time of my life. Like it's just like these moments that you're investing in yourself and really taking time out of capitalism, time out of life to like, not like this is something I care about. These are people I care about. This is something I'm passionate about. Like, let's live life.
yeah, yeah. It was a beautiful experience that I got to share with like different people, and we'll literally talk about it for the rest of our lives. And I can't be more thankful. Um, yeah, the human experience, man. Ooh.
Man, what an experience.
Yeah.
But let's get into the tail end of the podcast. I think I know a couple of the people you might mention, but who are some people who inspire you and or influence you?
Okay.
And don't feel pressure to have to name everyone. Like people gonna be
Oh,
mad at you. Like just some of the people, because I feel like people get caught up in like, oh, I can't leave this person. I can't leave this person out. Who are some people who inspire you and influence you? A non-exhaustive list.
okay. I think I'm just gonna do like three. One younger than me, older than me, and then someone who I don't even know. But like they're like celebrities,
Yeah.
inspirational people. Um one, my brother. Two, I feel like, Jazzy. Uh and then three, I'm gonna have to say probably Gary Vee. I was gonna say
Mm,
Jay, um, only because I really like thoroughly enjoy listening about like his like
mm,
um business mind, but I'll just stick with Gary Vee. Because he is the type of businessman that with like a really good genuine heart, and he truly
mm.
cares about like the people um that he's influencing. um and he's also a kid at heart, which I thoroughly enjoy. A lot of his businesses are just like, I'm just having fun, bro. I'm just having fun. So yeah.
What about some words of advice for someone who might be struggling to fit self-care into their passions, into their creative aspirations? What advice would you give them?
Ooh. Um, I'm going to go with what I read in it was either Becoming or The Light We Carry, and Michelle Obama specifically said, "You cannot do everything at once. You cannot." Not one person that you see, not Beyonce, not Michelle Obama, not Obama himself, not any of your favorite celebrities, human being, you cannot, as a human being, do everything at once. So focus, really focus on like your inner self, like listen to your body, listen to your breath, and like try to figure out like what is going on with you and like what areas you need to cut back, what's draining you. Um, and then, figure it out from there, like plan accordingly. Um, yeah, you are important. And if the machine is not, it's not going, I don't know what kind of gas you're gonna try to use to to, to try to fuel it, but yeah, it may need some maintenance. So yeah.
Love that. Let's go to, we've talked about it a little bit, but where can people find you? How can people support you and BinaBears? And when you talk about support, I would like you to give a way they can support you that requires money, but as well as ways that may not require money.
Sure. You can find me on IG at bina.bear_. My website, www.binabears.com. You could also just pull up Google and type in BinaBears. All over the page. You might get a random, where is BinaBear? I'm trying, honestly, I would love to do a collab with him and write a book, but that's future reference. Yeah, I'm on Facebook, TikTok I have. It's also just BinaBears, LinkedIn, Sabrina Evans. I'll be eventually, going and posting more on those social media platforms. But like I said, I'm understanding what capacity I can give, and just focusing on that. Support, honestly, just engage with the content. I know what I write is long. And I've tried to figure out, I try to do the Instagram or the algorithm thing and like not try to write long and do keywords and make sure it's this amount of time. And it's just like I won't be able to capture, what's meant to be captured. So I do spend a lot of time like reflecting and thinking everything that I write out. And it's for purpose and intention. It's not to just put stuff out there. I'm not trying to yeah. So yeah, engage with the content and yeah, keep following the BinaBear journey because it's about to get real wild. Next 5,
Blast
10,
this push.
10 years.
Well, I'm excited as it starts to get wild, that people have this episode to learn more about your journey, who you are as a person, and just, yeah, being prepared for the relaunch of BinaBears. Can't wait to do another episode with you on the Banquet Hall in 2033 when we're talking about how BinaBears has taken over the world and we could go to BinaBear land instead of Disneyland. I'm gonna manifest that for you.
Yes.
Yeah, but I definitely, I wanted to make sure that I said that I feel you on the whole like trying to do the algorithm caption thing. I'm just like, yeah, but now I feel like I'm not sticking to what my business is and who I am as a creative. And I think for me, what I've really been trying to be more intentional about is me as a creative. My brand and identity as a creative is more important than going viral and getting like a bunch of people to follow, because I want the community of the Banquet Hall, just as I know you want the community of BinaBears, to really feel like a true authentic experience. And it's like, yeah, BinaBears isn't selling out to get more clicks on this. This is the story in its long form. Some people are going to read all of it, some people are going to scroll past it, but it's there regardless.
Yeah, yeah. The blueprint is there. So if you ever try to question me, oh, go ahead and look at that post. Read the caption. I done said it. Don't take it out of context.
Absolutely. Which is why like this podcast is how it is. It's like, yeah, I know we live in a society with the attention span to only watch like 3 seconds of a TikTok, but for the people who truly care and are invested in people, like you could sit and listen to an hour and a half of somebody like talking about their story. Just because if Kanye had a long interview where he was like, "Oh, this is a tell-all interview. Everybody's tuning into that interview for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Why don't we also do that for the people in our lives?" So, yeah, just sticking to your brand is so essential, and I love that BinaBears is very passionate about that. Last few questions, then want to get to a very special part of the podcast to close us out. One would be, uh, what are any shameless plugs you have? Any shout outs? Any manifestations? We already talked about you coming up on the BinaBears, but as well as the relaunch coming November 19th. Anything else our listeners should be aware of, or anything you want to manifest while we're on the podcast?
If you don't already, follow my other account, at SME is me _ I'm planning on doing a little project next year.
Okay, project.
Yeah, everything that I've written in my journals these next several years are about to be the execution of that. And I'm fearful. It's scary as hell. I'm about to be doing stuff that I'm like, oh my gosh, God, what do you have me? What are you doing? But yeah, follow that. It is all for it's everything that I'm doing is for the people. And yeah, San Diego may not be my home anymore. So I'm manifesting that as well. But yeah, just stay tuned. I don't like to, have all my business out there.
No, of course.
I like to just hit them with the, oh, I'm leaving for 2 years to go to Moldova. So but I'm not going that far this time, but yeah, just stay tuned for that. Yeah.
I love it. You can tell that you're a Beyonce fan because you love a good random drop out of nowhere. Like, well, this is what Sabrina's doing.
Yes. I truly do. Yeah, I definitely respect her for her drops because she gets me every time. My gosh, every time.
We love a surprise job. What about recommendations for our listeners in the form of either books, podcasts, movies, or songs? But recommendations for people, whether it's just something you're like everybody needs to check this out, or something that if we engage in this piece of content, we'd learn something about you. So, any recommendations of either books, podcasts, movies, and or songs?
Oh, that's so there's so many.
You can just pick one. You don't have to do a bunch.
Um, Honestly, I feel like maybe the season that we're in, or a lot of people are in, is like understanding like, oh, what self-care and all that stuff looks like. I think Jay Shetty's podcast, or even his books, do a really good job of kind of breaking down like how much work it takes to like reflect and understand your purpose, and like what that requires of you, and the ways in which you can open your eyes to receive those messages out in the world. um yeah, I think we're just gonna go with Jay Shetty.
Love it. Jay Shetty. And then last formal question of the episode. What are some takeaways from this episode, both for our listeners as well as what are you taking away from this episode?
Ooh. I think this episode truly unplugging when you're having one-on-one time with someone. Um, Like, my gosh, that is so important. I can't tell you how many times. um, yeah, unplugging when you're with another human being. Like, you could be on it's okay to be on your phone. Um, but if you're with that person, just be intentional. Be intentional, unplug. I guess that's both for this podcast um and for myself. And yeah, also I learned that it did get easier. This is just talking about my story. So thank you for reassuring, because I was definitely scared. My gosh. I don't really like, yeah, I'm not a big, I like sharing stories, but um I like writing more, like speaking. So yeah, appreciate you for getting me out of my comfort zone. Woo, shout out to the Banquet Hall podcast, everyone.
Absolutely. You mentioned 2 hours ago that you were nervous, and here we are 2 hours later.
Oh my gosh, this
Such a
was 2 hours.
The
I'm
full
so
episode wasn't
sorry.
2 hours. No, don't be
Oh,
sorry. This is a good thing that it's 2 hours. The episode itself isn't 2 hours because we had a lot of like catching up and getting tea made and whatnot before the podcast started. But overall, like no matter how long this episode is, it was fantastic. Covered a lot. I feel like we really got a all-encompassing picture of who you are. Obviously, there's more to than we discussed, but I think that we gave people a nice jump off point to where they learn about you, learn about BinaBears, and just all of the thought, all of the inspiration, the intentionality behind what you do. Before I close this out, wanted to remind our listeners, make sure y'all follow the Banquet Hall on social media at Banquet Hall Pod. If you want to learn more about the podcast and check out who's been on the podcast prior, you can head over to my website, which is currently under development, but the Banquet Hall tab is live, thefourthkyler.com/BHP, as in Banquet Hall Podcast. You can check out the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Y'all tapped in with Sabrina, but definitely tap in with other folks. There's a lot of interesting people with great stories on this podcast. Sabrina is also a listener of the Banquet Hall, so she knows that there's a lot of great stories out there. Make sure y'all leave us a 5-star rating. This is 5-star content. You need the 5-star rating to go on top of that. Make sure you check out BinaBears.com. But before we officially close out, I had this on the run of show, and I want to make sure we left some time for it. I wanted to, dedicate this episode to a shared friend of ours, Kai Penn, who is your best friend, passed away back in 2020, also a very close friend of mine. I've mentioned Kai a lot on this podcast, someone who I know means a lot to you, obviously, as someone you grew up with and are best friends with. I think I've learned over the last few years just how much she meant to me and means to me to this day. So definitely wanted to dedicate this episode to Kai. And something that I did on a couple of episodes that I want to do on this episode was close us out with a poem, but also giving you space to say anything you want to say. But first wanted to start with a poem that I started Full Bloom with, which is dedicated to Kai also. So if the listeners don't mind to join me for this real quick, wanted to read this poem called Oxygen. From the moment we are born, something innately tells us to hurry up. We either immediately cry or someone we don't know tries to get us to so that we can breathe. No one teaches us that to breathe is to live until long before we have decided to breathe anyway. There isn't an instruction manual that tells you step by step how to live. It took me 20 plus years to learn what it meant to breathe. The first time I ever made sure my body was alive, I was already in college. The person who taught me was a stranger. I didn't know her middle name. If she had one, I still don't. What I did know is that there was a higher power in her. She opened a doorway to let me step into myself for the first time, to recognize that life is just life, and it is a pointless one if the vessel I carry through it wears down. She taught me that to love is to nurture, and that if you don't love yourself, how dare you try to love your other? She taught me that yoga is not just stretching, and that stretching is not just stretching. She stretched the layers of my brain, and they snapped back to a new reality. And then she taught me how to breathe, and what to breathe means, and how breathing takes place in many more places than we keep track of. Most importantly, she taught me the value of friendship and the value of valuing people's value. She taught me how much I valued her influence, her spirit, and with her last breath, she breathed her essence into the universe, always reminding me how to breathe. Thank you, Kai. When you learn how to breathe for the first time, it makes you remember that to breathe is to live is to grow is to reflect is to be present is a gift, and gifts are forever. So just wanted to take the time to dedicate this to Kai. Yeah, I love Kai. I know you love Kai a lot too. So just wanted to make sure that having you on the podcast, that we had space to truly honor her and just what she meant for BinaBears, what she means for both of us. Any last words you would like to say for this dedication?
That was a beautiful poem.
Thank you.
If I say any more, I'll start crying. So
tears are good. Feelings are good. Just couldn't exit this podcast without sharing those words. So thank you for allowing me to share those words. Thank you for being on the episode. Listeners, thank y'all for tapping in with us, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Banquet Hall podcast.